folks, just chiming in here at the top of our very first episode to give a huge thanks to everyone who's tuning in right now. If you and I have ever met in person, which, let's be honest, if you're listening to this very first episode not long after it came out, I probably pestered you about myself having a new podcast. But if we've met, you know that I've been threatening to start a podcast for literally years, with threaten being the operative word here. But now, thanks to layoffs in the games industry, I actually have time to make good on that threat. Plus, if any jerk off with a microphone can start a podcast about sports or conspiracy theories, then why can't I start a podcast about the thing that I love more than anything else in this world, which is video games? So come along as we talk about and even play a few stupid little games. Cue the theme music. Old and new, welcome to Stupid Little Games, a podcast where we talk about all things gaming from the inside out. Each week, I'll sit down with a guest from various parts of the gaming industry, and we'll chat about their current gaming obsessions. We'll tell stories from the games they've made or are currently making, and then we'll play a stupid little game that I have specifically made for each guest. Speaking of guests, our guest today, our very first guest on this podcast, is a 25-year veteran of the gaming industry. He's done just about everything there is to do in video games. He's been lead programmer, producer, game designer, technical director, overall game director. He's best known for Burnout, Need for Speed, Just Cause 3 and 4, maybe a couple little games that you have heard of, just to name a few. So please welcome my friend and overall awesome dude, is Hamish Young.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much. It's great to be here on the first. It's an honor to be on the first podcast. This is going to be a big thing, I think. You're going to crush it.
Aw, thanks. Thank you for coming on. Just a disclaimer, Hamish and I were former co-workers at Avalanche Studios, so we have been friends for a while. But thanks to the aforementioned layoffs, we both have some time to sit down and chat together for all of you. What are you up to these days, Hamish?
Great question. I've got a few irons and a few fires. I'm working on my own little game prototype right now.
We'll talk about that later.
So that's taking up a little bit of my time. As you mentioned, obviously, we both, in New York, there isn't a tremendous amount of games companies. There's not a tremendous amount of big games companies. There's lots of little ones.
Tons of indies.
Yeah. For now, I'm being a little indie myself.
Aw. We're probably not going to get into too much of the weeds of what you're working on, but I've seen some things and it's really impressive, and it's very, very cool. So to start off, I'd like to talk about our current obsessions, very first segment of the podcast. So I just want to talk about what we're playing right now, anything that has really caught your fancy, anything that you've played recently. Can you tell us what you're doing, why you like it, and maybe why someone out there should also play it?
Sure. So I've been on a bit of a, I think you would call them puzzle strategy games kick, but Balatro has definitely
that's on my list.
Yeah, has definitely been up there. Slay the Spire. I know it's not new, but and I think the sequel is coming out soon if it's not already. I think it's coming out soon. So those kind of games. I've been playing a lot of chess actually, which is maybe not a surprise for people who know me. So those kind of games. You used to
always be hanging around the office, like whenever in between something, you just have kind of chess going on your phone.
Yeah, I during the pandemic, it was kind of I got into it a little bit. So in terms of the big kind of 3D games, I'm kind of waiting for the glut that's coming in the next couple of months over the kind of run into Christmas. I'm interested in looking at the new kind of Call of Duty and a bunch of other bits and pieces, but obviously they're not obsessions yet, so we'll find out. I've been playing a lot of like little more kind of strategic games. And there's a YouTuber called Real Civil Engineer. I don't know if
Yeah,
you're
I
familiar
love
with
him.
Yeah, and so a lot of the games that he plays, I'm kind of it makes me interested in playing a bunch of those things as well.
I started watching him when he was doing the bridge builders.
Yes.
To see like how and the things he was making were
Like
pretty
Polybridge.
Yeah. It was so fun, and he's a good personality too. So he's fun to watch.
Yeah, he's good at kind of making it entertaining, and So there's a few YouTubers that I follow like that, and it's always kind of bringing you on to kind of either old games you haven't kind of got into or new games coming out, and I think that's kind of the fun is like finding some stuff that you wouldn't normally play.
So I want to talk to you. You said Balatro, and that's one of the things that I've been literally obsessed with this entire week. I'm a little late to it. I started playing it actually this past weekend, and because I knew that everybody's just like, you need to play Balatro, you need to play this game. So I honestly didn't know too much about it, but I knew, it was a card game. I didn't realize it was a roguelite, and I didn't realize just how immersive, and it's like, oh, just one more run. But I have noticed I've never been great at poker ever. Playing in person, I had an excuse though, because I don't have a poker face. I'm extremely, like, you can tell what's going on with me no matter what is happening on my face. But playing the game, that I don't have any excuse to not be getting better at it, but I'm terrible at it, but that makes me want to play it more, because I'm like, I'm going to get better. And what's your favorite deck?
That's a great question. I actually really like the erratic deck.
Okay, I haven't gotten to that yet.
Yeah, so the erratic deck, you basically, it randomizes which cards you get to begin with. So you might have like 10 aces. Like it's like that's the superpower is like it's an unbalanced deck, and so sometimes you can get your deck can be in an interesting shape from the start, which then gives you a run to go through. The one that I've pushed the furthest was, I think, the red deck. So with the extra discard. I think that, and there's another one as well which I pushed quite far, but I've unlocked all the decks, but I haven't made all the decks all of the levels of difficulty.
I've been playing a lot of the blue deck.
Yes.
So much, because that's the the yellow one, because that starts with an extra $10.
Yeah.
So that's been the one that I've been really building up the past couple of days. But I have been playing the blue deck a bit, and I'm gonna get better. It's gonna happen.
It does have to some extent. It overlaps with Slay the Spire, not in terms of like physically how you play necessarily, but in terms of the way the strategies intertwine to give you interesting options, and kind of the variety of ways you can build your deck and the way you shape your deck. They have they're very similar in that sense. I don't know if you played much Slay the Spire, but
I haven't.
But yeah, they have a similar feel, even though they're very different games.
One thing I really loved about Balatro is that I started playing it one night because I was kind of I had insomnia, and I couldn't sleep. So and I was like, oh, okay, well, I haven't played poker in years, but it really only took me about 10 minutes to realize what's going on with the game. And then I was like, okay, I'm in. Yeah. I'm in. The onboarding of that game is so quick.
It doesn't, it requires you to know the hands of poker.
Right.
But it doesn't require you to know the betting strategy of poker, which involves like how much should you bet, the pot, blah, 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 all that stuff, and all that reading people stuff. None of that is important to this game. So that if you don't like that kind of mathematical, like I have to work out what the odds are,
that's me.
You don't have to do that.
I don't need odds. I love all the interesting jokers. I do have one gripe.
Okay.
Because I have just started playing it, and I'm really just getting used to the muscle memory of the discard and the play, like playing your hand and like the discard. I have discarded when I meant to play.
What platform were you playing on?
On my Switch.
You see. Okay, because I play on my Mac, and I think it's definitely a mouse first game.
I think that would probably be better.
Yeah.
Because the top button is discard, and then the left button is play. And so I got really far, and it was one of the farthest runs I had, which isn't super high. Like I've seen some folks play it online. They've gotten just in the millions. And I'm just like, one day. But I was doing so well, and I accidentally like discarded the hand that I meant to play, and I was so mad. I almost threw my Switch, and it was like 4:00 in the morning, and I almost threw it across the living room.
Well, you know, if you're doing spectacularly well, if you get into scientific notation for the numbers.
I have not gotten to there.
You get like 12e to the 12 or whatever. Like you you can actually go like well beyond the billions.
Oh, that makes me so excited, because I'm very excited about the game, because I love finding a new game and then just following into it.
Yeah.
Even preparing for this podcast, I had to put it down and say, I need to write some things so that I'm not just playing Balatro and then be unprepared.
Yeah, when you're in, you're in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really good. So I think it's what, Local Thunk that made that game.
Yeah.
So good on Local Thunk.
And talking about, like, I went back to Stardew Valley again for the first time in a long time.
1.6 comes out for the Switch on November 4th, which is my birthday, and I'm excited about it.
And I've completely forgotten how to play.
It comes back.
I'm 3 years in, I have all this stuff going, and there's so many things going, I can't, like, my daily cycle is just like, I'm just going to let it all rot, because I can't remember all the things I used to do in order to go through the day.
I've played Stardew Valley on every single platform that I've had since the game came out. It's my top game of all time. Like right here behind us, I have like the Stardew Valley theme from going to see the orchestra in a frame. And I'm very excited about 1.6, but I'm also really excited about Haunted Chocolatier whenever that comes out.
Sure.
Whenever that comes out. Another thing that... since we're not just going to, so that we don't talk about Balatro for an hour, because I probably could. I just finished all of the Fields of Mystria early access content. It's a farming sim, speaking of Stardew Valley, but there's so much to do. It's kind of like Stardew Valley, but with more magic. There's a lot of people. There's super dynamic like conversations that you have with the villagers. So, but it's only in early access. So I've kind of finished up all of that content. There's about 40 hours. So that's kind of done. I played that on my Steam Deck, which it was pretty optimized for. But one thing that I've been watching lately, I've not been playing it, but I got sucked in, is the GeoGuessr World Championships.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Have you ever watched the World Championships?
I've watched the World Champ. I've seen GeoGuessr before, and I've seen people.
It's wild.
Yeah, no.
It's wild. So if anyone out there likes GeoGuessr at all, the World Championships is on YouTube and on the GeoGuessr website, on the GeoGuessr channel, and the rounds are so interesting, and I was on the edge of my seat because the people will be head to head, and these folks, they try to make them out to be kind of these like rock stars, but they're just like folks who just want to sit and look at the computer, because it's not an exciting game when you're playing it. It's
like not Simone Biles doing backflips.
No, it's not. It's not. But it's interesting the stuff they tried to do to make this an entertaining show when the actual GeoGuessr rounds weren't happening. It was very funny, but it's great. So there's a guy named, his name is Blinky, and he's French, and I think he was a Japanese and French, or that part of Europe, or his specialties. Like everybody has specialties. They can tell what country they're in, like from the first second. They have a thing where you just can't move at all. Like one of the rounds, you just can't move, and you have to figure out where you are. And they come within like 2 kilometers of it's wild. So watch the GeoGuessr Championships. There's a new, and it's also really interesting to me, the GeoGuessr kind of phenomena, because it's a pretty new game. It's only been out for 4 or 5 years maybe, or something like that, but it has gotten so popular that now they have a whole World Cup championship of GeoGuessr.
It's definitely very impressive to see people do it well, because it is a skill. I wouldn't go far as to call it necessarily a sport.
Yeah. They try to make it look like a sport.
Yeah. I mean, in the same way that darts is like...
That's actually a really good comparison, because they have all of this fanfare, and then the dudes that are actually, or the folks that are actually playing darts are just kind of like, they get up there, they throw it, and then they walk off.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a competition, and it's definitely like very difficult, and lots of skill involved. There's no doubt about that. But I don't know. It's definitely there's a little bit of a line between a game and a sport for me, right? And you can be a championship winner at a game, that's fine. But like, yeah, that line is an interesting one.
Yeah, it's really interesting to watch. You should take a look at it. Also, I'm very proud of myself for going through a whole current obsessions without talking about Power Wash Simulator.
I was going to mention it just because you didn't. But yes, I feel like...
it's my favorite game of all time, just for everybody out there.
Yeah, I was surprised. And now you've mentioned it now. The circle is complete.
It is.
Yeah.
The Shrek pack comes out next week, which makes so much sense. I think Power Wash Simulator going into other IPs and like you can now clean things. I will give them all the money that I have.
You're personally keeping them afloat, so
yeah. And I talk about Power Wash Simulator to everyone. Like you can ask Hamish. Talking at at Avalanche, I always talked about Power Wash Simulator. People, it became a joke that I was just going to talk about Power Wash Simulator.
It got beyond being a joke. It suddenly it was not. It was kind of earnest, and then it was a joke, and then you've come out the other side of it, and it's just like a force of nature now.
It's
just a fact
for Power Wash Simulator. Cool. So I think this is a great time to take a small break.
Sure.
This episode is brought to you by Chaotic Wholesome Presents. Are you a TTRPG fan? Then join Chaotic Wholesome for all of their wholesome chaos. You can fall in love with new favorite actual play or tune in weekly for the Table Talk show where they cover all things TTRPGs from indies to intersectionality. You can catch them live at twitch.tv/chaotic wholesome. That's CHAOTICWHOLESOME. Or you can check out their videos on YouTube at youtube.com/chaotic wholesome. Personally, I'm a fan of Chaotic Wholesome and the amazing folks who run it. It's run by Kay and David, and they do charity streams, they do pride streams, horror streams, they play video games. They just did a hilarious full run of Baldur's Gate. So they've done so much. So subscribe to them on Twitch and to YouTube if you don't want to miss a thing, which you don't. Thanks again to Chaotic Wholesome for sponsoring our very first episode. And we are back. Hamish, I want to talk about, because you've been in the industry for such a long time.
I'm old. Yep.
Hey, we're both about the same age. So 25 years, what's that all about?
Yeah, it's kind of wild. 25 years. Yeah, it's the industry has changed a lot over that period of time. And it's kind of slightly eaten its own tail a little bit in that time. Like teams just got so big, and that can't go on forever, and it's not going on forever. So we're kind of almost reaching maturity, I think, in some sense.
Do you think it's hitting like a bubble now, like especially with all the layoffs that are happening? Because you used to be able to make a game with 30 people, right? And now it's what, 100 and...
The first Burnout game I worked on was 15.
Ugh.
That was AAA, right?
Wow, yeah.
So... And
now AAA games have hundreds, well, depending on which game it is, but 150 people to what was it that the latest of...
Well, GTA 6 is reported to be in the billions of dev cost.
Yeah, 2 billion?
No one knows.
Something like that?
I mean, I don't even know they know, but I'm sure somebody does. But like, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of people.
They had to pay most of that just for the music rights.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I definitely. It's not to say GTA 6 won't be successful, but it's definitely true that like the budgets have got so big that it just puts a real pressure on everything in a way that's not healthy. Yeah. And I think that I think that we've kind of reached peak team size. Like, I don't think GTA 7, if it exists, is going to be like 10 times as much again. Like, you just can't grow that way. So there is a natural limit. It turns out in the movie industry, like 300 million is or 400 million is like the limit for a movie. And I think it was at Waterworld, or there were a bunch of
at the time that was the most expensive, and it was technically a flop, right?
Absolutely, but that's the thing, is that once you get big enough, everything is a flop.
Even though they had a whole thing at Universal Studios,
you literally just can't make your money back. So yes, there's a natural limit to these things, and so we're hitting that phase right now where just the bet you have to make is so big that it's just kind of almost not worth it by definition. And gamers are very sophisticated, and so I think we're now at that phase where we'll begin to head towards a bit of maturity, and what that means is that smaller teams with great tools can make some great pieces of art, great games.
Do you think that's why we're seeing kind of this renaissance of just really imaginative and successful indie games coming out right now?
Yes, but that, like any art form, is built on a pyramid of an awful lot of people trying and not necessarily making it. Like, the successes that you see are the exception, not the rule. And that's true for every art form, right?
Yeah.
How many aspiring authors are there? How many aspiring musicians are there? How many aspiring your art?
Right.
You name it, right? They exist. And you get some bubbling up to the top, sometimes through talent, sometimes through luck, sometimes through circumstance or whatever. But that doesn't make it fair. But the alternative isn't going to work in the future. It's just too expensive.
Yeah.
So, I'm, both of us kind of got laid off roughly at the same time.
Yes.
But I kind of, it was kind of inevitable at some level. Yes, it happened surprisingly quickly, but at the same time, like, it was always coming, and not just for us, for the industry in general.
For those of us listening who don't actually know us personally, Hamish and I were both laid off from Avalanche Studios. They closed the office in New York and Montreal. So a lot of really great people lost their jobs. There was no way to really save them because the office was no longer there. So no one lost their job because they weren't great at what they were doing. Absolute opposite. They were amazing.
Right, but that all comes down to the basic economics of building a big game.
Yeah.
And so the way you fix that is by changing the game, right? Changing the economics. Either that's better tooling, smaller teams, better production mechanisms. There's a whole bunch of ways you can do it better. And the market forces, the setup is kind of forcing everyone to do it better. And there's no way of getting away from gravity, right? Like, gravity pulls, and that's just the way it goes. So I'm not in any way bitter. I've been in the industry 25 years. I've worked at 2 companies in that entire time.
Yeah, so Criterion first, and then Avalanche Studios after that. You were at Criterion for, 15 years?
Yeah, almost, 13, 14 years there.
And Avalanche for 11.
10 or 11 years, yeah. Yeah, so 14 and 11, yeah.
That's really interesting and different than most of the game devs that I know that have gone from... because of lots of different things, because of layoffs, because of
it's quite a mobile industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It is a mobile industry.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you tell us about some of the games that you have worked on that I already said them at the beginning, but the Burnout, Need for Speed, the little games called Just Cause 3 and 4.
Yeah, I mean, I was very lucky. I went to university, did a computer science degree, and when I left university in 1999, 25 years ago, the market was very different than it is now. I think a game degree didn't exist. There was no such thing as a game degree, and
did you get a computer science degree?
Yeah, I did maths with computer science. And a lot of the programmers who were existing in the industry at the time, in fact, most of them were self-taught. They were hobbyists who turned it into a profession.
There's bedroom programmers. And so, coming into that scenario with an awful lot of software engineering
like expertise and the understanding and those things, it made it quite easy for me to enter the industry that way, just because the differential was quite large. And I went to work at Criterion, which I actually had a bunch of offers from different companies, and I chose Criterion partially because they were owned by Canon, the big Japanese printer camera manufacturer, because it was a company that was going to be well run. It had a good pension, a Japanese style final salary scheme.
Nice.
It was a stable organization. It wasn't run by cowboys. And so you got a bunch of people there and it also made middleware. So at the time, renderware was basically what Unreal is now to the industry. Like an awful lot of the big hits you saw, like even GTA on PlayStation 2, all running renderware. So it had a middleware business and a games business. So it was a really good place to start a career. And so I was incredibly lucky. And then soon after I joined, the company got very serious about not just making games, but making great games.
Yeah.
And so I joined the Burnout team very, very early on, right at the beginning of the actual game, at the end of the prototype phase. And we had a hardcore team of people there who really, really wanted just to do anything to make a game that was going to stand out. And we were very lucky. Like Burnout, if you look back at it, it wouldn't pass for an indie game these days. Like the quality of it is worse than an indie game is now. It was made by 15 people. It sold over 1 million copies. It hit a market that was crying out for that kind of game at the time. But look back on it and you're like, oh my God, like this isn't very good.
But people love Burnout.
Right. But, and that's the thing is like, games are like fashion. It's the fashion industry. It's the pop industry. You're making hits. If I released a song right now that sounded like the Everly Brothers, it wouldn't do very well. However well sung or, it's not the right thing for now.
True.
And so you're in the pop industry. If you're making hits, it's about hitting what people want. And at the time, that's what people wanted. If you release that now, it would not do business at all. Like it wouldn't make a name for itself. Even if you're a one-person dev team indie, it wouldn't be enough, right? So I think that standards have changed an awful lot. And I was very lucky to join the industry just on that growth curve of, things in my sophistication getting better, my understanding of how to make games getting better as the industry matured. So I've been very, very fortunate in terms of hitting things at a time where I could get away with it being bad, essentially. You just can't do that now.
I bet learning things at that time was so exciting because there's so many new things every 5 minutes, it seemed like.
Yeah, and also, like, there wasn't a standard way of doing it. Like, you were literally making it up as you went along. And that meant that if you had a group of people who really were passionate about how you made it, you could do stuff that no one else could do. Because turns out a lot of people actually cared about how they made it in the sense of what they preferred for them, rather than making it in a kind of more objectively better way. So you got a lot of bedroom coders who did it because that's the way they wanted to do it, not necessarily because that improved the game. And we had a group of people who really understood what it would take to move that needle. And over the course of that 13, 14-year run, when I was there, we had the opportunity to innovate and do new stuff and put those values down into software in a way that, that's the advantage of being at companies a long time, is you get to see the payoff of all that work. People who jumped in for a game and went out again didn't get to see how that paid off the next game.
So were you super into cars growing up, like before you got into gaming? Because it just seems like you worked on Burnout, you worked on Need for Speed, and then Just Cause wasn't all about the cars, but the cars were a huge part of it.
Well, I was also the vehicle guy on JC, so yeah, kind of. My whole family's on the engineering end of things. So my dad was in the Navy; he was a submariner, and he married the sister of one of the other submariners that he was working with. So it's my family's very naval, and my dad was an electrical engineer by trade, but then became a nuclear engineer because he was involved in nuclear reactors for submarines. And so my my cousin is a literal F1 engineer, so he worked in McLaren, the F1 stuff. His brother is a motorcycle journalist, like in that end of things. I've got other cousins who are like mechanical engineers and so on. One of my cousins actually moved to Miami for a couple of years to go down the bilges of cruise ships to inspect ships for seaworthiness. They were like the person who certified cruise ships to be able
really
to
cool.
sail. So yeah, there's a lot of strong engineering kind of background. My mum was a mathematician, my dad was an electrical engineer. So yeah, I grew up around a lot of that. There was a lot of boats, but there was also a lot of cars as well. So yeah, no, it feels very natural. And the UK in particular has got a very long history of a certain type of automotive. So as anyone who's ever driven like a British car, British cars are not known for their reliability.
Well, I was going to ask you, like being super into cars and working on car games for so long, please tell me that you had that rite of passage of the piece of shit first car. Because everybody needs that piece of shit first car.
Yeah, I had a Ford Fiesta, which wasn't actually that bad. It was, the brakes were,
iffy,
challenging, but no, it was actually a really fun first car. So I didn't have, like, it wasn't too bad. The thing with the UK is that there's something called the MOT.
What is that?
Which is a annual check of whether the car is roadworthy or not.
Gotcha.
So
they used to do that here. I don't know how it is anymore because I've lived in New York City for almost 20 years, so I haven't had a car. But I remember my grandmother having to go in for inspection once a year, and then you get a little sticker to put on your car.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's still the case in the UK. So there's only so bad you can go before you can't drive it anymore.
Gotcha. So you can't have too much of a piece of shit car because then the UK will just be like, well, no, that's now going to sit on your lawn.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you got to maintain it enough. Throw
a Band-Aid on that bumper.
Yeah. But UK car, like British cars, have got a similar reputation as, I guess, Italian cars in terms of their reliability. Italian cars, very beautiful, gorgeous, beautiful pieces of art. Not known for necessarily staying together very well. Maseratis are beautiful, but
but they'll go real fast.
Well, they'll go very fast. They also break very fast as well.
They will fall apart.
Yeah, and TVRs and all those kind of British cars are also pretty well known for not sticking together very well. But a lot of racing automotive, so F1 teams, but also actually some IndyCar and NASCAR stuff happens in the UK as well, because the teams that do exist in the UK are incredibly highly talented specialists at like low production volume type things. So very, very good engineering, but like not necessarily mass engineered.
I mean, it'll at least really teach you how to optimize your car for rain.
Exactly. So actually the Brits have got a pretty good reputation for racing cars, but very bad reputation for production. And it's kind of a little similar, in the games industry, is that so an awful lot of the racing games in the world are made in the UK.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because there's so much. Yeah. So is it just because everyone's in Guildford together? or
so Leamington Spa is actually probably bigger for racing games like Codemasters and all those, and playground games, and like there's not just Guildford, but there is Guildford as well. No, so I think the whole of the UK is like there's something that is particularly good about that kind of engineering of kind of gameplay, physics, all those things are definitely just seem to fit the British mentality very, very well. And it's interesting that, you get original Forza in, which is, made by Microsoft in US, and you get GT, Gran Turismo, made in Japan. And that's a very Japanese way of making a game, which is very precise. I mean, like Gran Turismo
is like you're in the car,
right? It's very attention to detail in a very kind of very, very bespoke kind of way. You see, the UK games tend to be less about precision in that sense and more about just raw fun. And I think that's where the UK, Codemasters, yes, they have the F1 games, but you've got grid and you've got dirt and you got Forza Horizon versus Forza. Like the UK teams tend to take that and then make a lot more like fun stuff with it generally.
Yeah, I feel like especially like the Need for Speed games, they do have some whimsy in there that are a lot of fun that you don't see in like Gran Turismo.
Yeah, and obviously, like UK hasn't made all of the Need for Speed games by any stretch of imagination. I mean, like
there are a lot.
Black Box, who Canadian, like Vancouver based, made most of the kind of really big Need for Speeds, and then later there was like some Swedish influence as well,
of course.
And actually, yeah, the Swedes, the Brits, and the Canadians are kind of have a similar-ish repertoire when it comes to some of these things. Like Rally Sport Challenge and Rally Sport Challenge 2 was made in Sweden by DICE, actually. So,
nice.
So yeah, there's definitely expertise around, and Bugbear are, I think, Finnish.
Did you get to do any cool research while you were making the games?
Surprisingly little. We had one track day in Silverstone.
Where is that?
That's... it's kind of it's in the south of England, but it's not. Yeah, I can't remember exactly which county it's in, but it doesn't really matter. Silverstone is like one of the main tracks in the UK, so it's the F1 track for the British Grand Prix. And we went for a single day's track day there, and the only reason why we went to that track day is another team that had been building a car game in EA. Their game got canned, but they booked this track day.
Oh, so you snatched it.
Yeah, so literally we wouldn't have I don't think Criterion wasn't super into like trying to be too realistic. So the best day of driving I had when there were two situations actually which were best for driving when I was at Criterion. One was we did like a summer. No, it was the Christmas party or like Christmas whatever, and we did an outing where we went to an ice rink, and we drove go-karts around an ice rink.
Around an ice rink.
Yeah, so it was like ice go-karting. Okay,
so that sounds amazing. It sounds terrifying.
No, it's great. It's so fun. You just drift like you can, it's a bit like a
How do you not just fly off the?
You're not going very fast.
Yeah, I guess not.
So this is the thing. It's like you haven't got much grip, so you're not going very fast, but you're going sideways the whole time.
I'm thinking about like the Mario Kart levels that all you're doing is slipping and sliding.
Yeah, but you're going just in a loop like it's an oval, and literally you could set it up so you were drifting like the whole oval all of the time.
But did you not run into other people a lot?
No, there weren't too many people on the track at the same time, so it wasn't too bad. Okay. But also, it wasn't that fast. If you bumped into somebody, it was like
bumper cars instead of...
Yeah, I mean, it like compared to like high-speed go-karts, we really weren't going that quick, but you were just going very sideways.
I wonder who had like a speed skating, like ice skating rink, and then they're like, you know what? We need to put some cars on this bitch.
Well, it's actually something that happens like in like mountain resorts and stuff. So like, if you go to the Alps or whatever, they'll often actually have an outdoor like ice track for like driving around. And obviously somebody decided, well, we've got a ice rink that we're not using for anything else. We'll do that, in the off season or whatever. So yeah, it was just one of those things. And the other experience was we did a press event for Need for Speed Most Wanted in Leipzig in Germany.
Nice.
Because EA had an exclusive license with Porsche. So Leipzig is one of where the Porsche factories are. It's not where the 911 is built. It's where the SUV and the saloon car, the estate car, is built. So, but we got 911, like we got Carrera S's each, like the three of us, me, another producer, and the creative director, and we got a Porsche each to drive.
What color was yours?
Mine was kind of a metal grey, like
nice.
like one of those modern Apple computers. But so with the three of us, and it was literally like an episode of Top Gear. Like if we had filmed it, afterwards we looked back and we should have filmed it.
Instead of Hammond, it's Hamish.
Yeah, well, I was closer to being Captain Slow in that scenario. I was the only person that actually read what the driving like laws were in Germany.
Just like on the Autobahn, just like, how fast were you going? I know that not all of the Autobahn is speed limitless, but parts of it are, right?
Right. Yeah, so the cars are limited, though.
Right.
So the maximum you can go is 155 miles an hour, because the cars are...
Just 155 miles per hour.
I did 145. I didn't quite get up to 155. If the car was feeling a little jumpy above 145 miles an hour. But yeah, doing 100.
For how long though? So how long can you like reasonably sustain 145 miles an hour? And were you shitting yourself? Because I would be so afraid.
I wasn't scared. I was paying attention, obviously. Like, you know, things can happen very quickly at that speed. But no, I was very focused on making sure I was driving safely. It kind of depends. I mean, it was a big straight section of the Autobahn near Leipzig, and the traffic wasn't bad. So, you know, and German traffic they're very good at pulling out. They don't just sit in the fast lane and drive slowly. So yeah, no, you just have to be very aware that things can.
Were you in the car by yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's three of us, and each in a car driving, you know, quite fast down the Autobahn. And we had walkie-talkies, so we were doing
It was Top Gear.
Oh yeah. The funniest thing is we came out of the airport and we picked up these cars, and the GPS in the cars wanted to take us a certain route to Leipzig town centre, which is where the hotel was, and there was roadworks on the way, and so we kind of got lost because we couldn't go the way the GPS actually wanted us to. And then we got to Leipzig, and it was a Saturday, and it was like market day. So everything was pedestrianised. Like, you know, everyone was so we had to crawl through crowds of people to get to the hotel. The downside was the GPS also wasn't aware that part of the centre of Leipzig had become pedestrianised. Like, there were bollards preventing you to go through the route it wanted you to go through. And so we crawled into this space, came across these barriers, had to slowly turn around and then crawl back out through all these crowds.
I wish you would have filmed it. Like, it really is Top Gear.
Oh, yeah. And then we did this 4 times.
I bet those German pedestrians are just like, who are these assholes in Porche?
Trying to drive through the bus lane of Leipzig. And we did this 4 times because every time we would like come out
again. It was some sort of stunt from Porche just so people could see the cars.
I doubt it. I mean, like, half the people there probably work at the Porsche factory. They you know, so...
I made that car.
Yeah, exactly. So like, and every time we tried to get to the hotel, it would take us a route where we couldn't get through. So in the end, we gave up and we just parked the cars up, and I walked to the hotel, which was literally just round the corner. And I asked the guy at the desk to give me a map of how to get the one route to get into the hotel. So literally there was one route that gets you from the outside of Leipzig to the hotel. So he drew me the one route on the map for us to get through. So we got to the hotel and we were like, okay, great, we're here now. Awesome. Where are we going to go? Like, we've got these cars.
You have to go somewhere.
We've checked into the hotel. For the rest of the weekend, we've got, like, you know, work. We're going to be doing, you know, looking after journalists and those things. So tonight is, you know, if we're going to drive somewhere in these Porsches, we've got to do it tonight. So we look close by. And are you familiar with Colditz?
No.
Well, I don't think a lot. I feel like there's maybe either a generational thing or just an American thing. Colditz is a castle, like a medieval castle.
Oh.
That was converted into... I
feel like I've seen like aerial views. Yeah. That sounds very familiar.
That was converted into a prisoner of war camp.
When these people say like, why don't we make things like this anymore?
Well, it was converted into a prisoner of war camp during World War II.
Oof.
And it was like a high security prisoner of war camp where people got sent that would escape from other camps.
I bet the ghosts there are pissed.
So there's actually a board game called Escape from Colditz, and like it's a thing. Like it's and it's this beautiful medieval castle, and it wasn't that far away from Leipzig. So we were like, okay, well, we'll drive to Colditz, and so we drove to Colditz, and when I was in front, like leading the pack of 3 cars, I read the rules of the road and knew that in Germany, if you get to the town sign of entering a town or a village, the speed limit goes from 100 kilometers an hour down to 50.
Right.
But there's no signage saying 50.
You just have to slow down.
You have to know that if you're in a town limits, whatever, the speed comes down from 100 to 50. Now, 100 kilometers an hour is 60 miles an hour. And 50 is 30 miles an hour. So you have to come down to 30 miles an hour when you're going through these towns. And so I would do that. Like when I reached the city limits, I would slow down and we would go through, and then we'd go outside, we'd go back up to, a reasonable speed. But the 2 people I were with didn't really understand that.
Oh,
and
no,
so when
they're slowing down and they're just zoom.
Well, no, I mean, they didn't overtake me in a 30 or whatever. But when they were ahead, they would just be off. And I'd be like, I'm not
on your little walkie-talkie.
Yeah,
like, hey guys, we don't really want to go to a German prison. So
I feel like I associate more strongly with James May in that sense than I do with Hammond. But and we ended up in Colditz, and it's this beautiful castle, all lit up, like the they've got those uplights of a historic building, and beautiful. They'd closed for the day, so we couldn't go around it, but it was like beautiful castle. And it's just one of those driving memories where you're with friends, you're all in some amazing cars doing an amazing trip, and it was just we could have filmed it. We probably should have filmed it. It was so funny. There was so many things that happened on that trip that were just. They felt like they could have been skits, and they weren't, because that was
like, this is the parody of the Fast and the Furious movies. So the scary movie equivalent of Fast and Furious. So it was trying to get to this hotel. So
it was a lot of fun, but it's a memory I've had that for a long time, and the 2 folks I'm still friends with who we did that with, they now live in LA actually. So I'm going to be hopefully seeing them in November. But it's wild. It was a great experience. When you gave the cars back to Porche, did you tell them everything that you did? Well, no. So we didn't actually hire them off Porche. We hired them off Hertz, I think, or Hertz had Porche. Yeah. So in Germany, like the high Avis or Hertz, they have. Porsches as their kind of, their fun car that you can hire. And at the time, it actually wasn't that expensive, because in Germany, obviously, there's lots of Porsches and they do a deal. And so, if you drive a Porsche or a Lamborghini in Vegas, it's going to cost you thousands a day. In Leipzig, it was like 100 a day or something like that. It was more expensive than hiring a Kia or something like that, but it wasn't crazy. It was actually very affordable. Nice. I can't believe you just go to a Hertz and just be like, I need the fastest thing on the planet, please. Yeah, I mean, they weren't the craziest 911s either. They were decent. They were decent 911s, but they were just so much fun. Yeah. That's cool. So that's kind of a non sequitur into something I did want to ask you, because you have been in the game industry for so long. If there are folks listening who would love advice about how to get into the industry right now, because it's such a weird, volatile time, and the advice can't just be don't right now. What sort of advice would you have for somebody that kind of wants to get into the game industry these days? Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's easy advice. Yeah. I think it's definitely valuable to be able to be in and around places where there are hubs of games being made. Whether you're in Austin in Texas or in, California or whatever, like if you want to work at the bigger kind of companies, there's definitely value in being in and around spaces where there's a lot of there's a lot of activity.
Yeah. Raleigh's doing crazy things right now. There's so many just right around in and around North Carolina.
North Carolina is a hub. They've got the universities there. Like, there's a bunch of places.
Research triangle is what we used to call it when I was in South Carolina.
And so, like, that's definitely a hub. There's hubs all over the place. But I definitely think that's one option. I think that there's no substitute really for practicing your skills. Before I went to university, before I did a computer science degree, I was already a good programmer and spent actually years getting better and better at being a programmer even before I went to university. University will teach you some stuff, but it isn't a substitute for putting the hours in from that point of view.
I mean, it pays to still be a bedroom programmer no matter what you're doing.
Yeah, I was in a weird situation because I was a bedroom programmer. At the same time, my dad was running software teams like in the defense industry, and for my 12th birthday bought me a professional C++ compiler.
Okay.
With all the manuals.
Were you the only preteen that you knew with a full compiler?
Oh yeah. I mean, this is like.
Well, I don't know what they do in England. Maybe it's something you get.
He bought it secondhand off one of his programmers, so it wasn't new. It was like secondhand. But it was like a full professional setup. And he would like give me like, he would throw like software engineering articles at me and like books and stuff. Like, it wasn't just like be a programmer. It was like be a good software engineer. And this was, early 90s, mid 90s. So the same era that was like, the Mega Drive Genesis, Super NES and that kind of era, Amiga, Archimedes kind of era. That's when I was learning like really to program professionally, essentially. So when I went to university, it was less about learning how to program and more about learning computer science.
Right.
Which is a different beast. So by the time I came out the other side, I was quite a well-rounded. Like, I was fresh-faced, but I also wasn't. And I think that there's once again, there's no substitute for just putting the hours in of work. And if you can do that, you never necessarily need to be hired by someone as well. Like, if you can make something, you can make something. Like, being great at making things means you can get hired. But being great at making things means you can make things.
Yeah.
Right? And I think the focus should always be about being a maker rather than necessarily just getting a job. Like, if you want a job, go work in a bank or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to make things, get really good at making things. The job will come. Whether that's self-employed or whether that's being employed by someone else. If you can get really good at making things, the other thing will sort itself out.
Do you have words for folks that want to get into the gaming industry that may not necessarily be programmers? Yeah,
I mean, when I say making things, I don't just mean programming.
So, right. Overall.
Yeah. I mean, I
shit.
Make stuff, right? I think whatever you choose to do in the creative arts, and programming is a creative art, you have to learn how to make things and make things well, and make things with purpose. And make things that have a point of view, and make things that are, that point of view can be whimsical. It can be whimsical, it can be serious, it can be all those things. But being able to be a craftsman, whether that's crafting code or sculpting, 3D stuff, or literally, painting a painting on a piece of canvas, or playing a musical instrument or any of those things. Like, it's all about just putting that time in is really, and no company can kind of do that for you.
Right. I think that's a great place to leave it, because I want to give us time to play your stupid little game.
Yes.
I'm pretty excited about this. So one of the gimmicks about this whole podcast is called Stupid Little Games, because I love to just make, one of the things that I make is games. So I have made a game for you, Hamish.
Okay.
And if you want to continue listening to subsequent episodes of this podcast, I'm going to be making games bespoke to each guest that I have on. So since you are I have note cards, because I'm a fucking professional, as I always say, and it says top secret on the top because I didn't want Hamish to see any of what it was called. So
just to be clear, I have absolutely no knowledge.
Hamish has no idea. He asked about it and I was like, nope, absolutely not. I'm not telling you. So the game is called Must Have Acceleration.
Must Have Acceleration.
Must Have Acceleration.
Okay.
A game of mostly Need for Speed trivia.
Oh, God.
I said mostly.
Okay.
I said mostly. So if you don't remember every single little thing that happened when you were making those couple of Need for Speed games, that is okay.
Okay. That's good because, my memory is not great, so we'll see.
Mine either. It's okay. So let's go. So Must Have Acceleration, a game of mostly Need for Speed trivia. How did the Need for Speed franchise get its name?
In terms of its actual name, so the actual Need for Speed franchise came out of a company called, I think, Distinctive or Distinct Software, something like that. Got bought by EA. Don Matrick was his company, and him and a few other EA execs at the time had some very fast cars, and they were like, "Why don't we make a game about the experience of owning these really fast cars?" So I don't know how much Top Gun was involved in that decision. It feels like it might have been, but it's also possible that they were contemporaneous, but maybe not directly related.
Well, according to the internet, which is always right, you're right. It comes from Top Gun in 1986, where Maverick and Goose were like, I feel the need for speed. And I used to watch that movie all the time because we had an illegal cable box and it would come on HBO. And so I would just watch it over and over again on HBO. So when I started driving, I started saying that even though I was driving like a Honda Civic and going 30 miles per hour.
But if you think about it, I don't know where Top Gun got it from. So
I don't either.
So I don't know whether there's a common ancestor or whether they just borrowed it off Top Gun.
I don't know. Were there any other there's a New York is New Yorking outside if you hear sirens. Were there any other Top Gun-ish references at all in any of that you know of in the Need for Speed games?
No, I don't think it was I don't think actually it was a huge influence. That's why I'm saying it may not be a direct lineage. But I didn't work at that company at that time. So you would have to ask more closely. I think, in terms of the Burnout series, obviously, I was much more involved in the naming of those things because the original code name for Burnout was Shiny Red Car.
Shiny Red Car?
Yeah. So all of the the source code and everything, all the prefixes for everything was SRC, Shiny Red Car, and it was the SRC team. So it was Shiny Red Car was the code name for that, and it took us a long time to actually come up with what the name of the actual game was. Same with things.
Naming is hard. Every single tech company I've ever worked for, I've always had the chance to just be like, naming is hard.
I was fortunate enough because I was a producer on Burnout Paradise to name all of the manufacturers of the cars in Burnout Paradise, and basically the way it worked is that we knew which nationalities we wanted these cars to come from, and a lot of engineering firms are the surnames of people.
Gotcha.
Right. So if you think of Whitney and Pratt and Porsche and Ferrari, they're all surnames. So I literally took the top surnames from each country that the cars came from, and the top ones that sounded like cars that weren't trademarked as car names were the ones that we pulled in as the manufacturer names for the cars in Burnout Paradise. So Rossellini, for example, is an old Italian family name that's kind of in the same kind of world as Ferrari and those things.
Isabella Rossellini.
Yeah. And so, there's a good Janssen in was one of the other ones and so on. So,
do you not think that's a little arrogant? Because I feel like if I was going to start a car company, I wouldn't call it Pardue Cars.
Well, actually, the funny thing is that
I call it something inventive.
It initially isn't arrogance in the sense of these are little shops. When they start, they're these little mom and pop businesses that are just the the people who start them up. It's the lack of pretension, which means they don't like put some fancy name on it. It's just, it's a bit like, lawyers or, like it's just like a family business. So they put their family name on it.
That's true. I guess Porsche didn't start as this gajillion-dollar company. It started with like probably a family.
Well, and a lot of those
mechanics.
Italian manufacturers were originally tractor manufacturers.
Oh. Today I learned.
Yeah, so Lamborghini, for example, I think still make tractors.
But if my last name was Lamborghini, I would need to put that on something.
Right, but this is the thing.
The best name. I mean, it's also just fun to say.
It is fun to say, but I think...
I would call everything Lamborghini. That's my Lamborghini couch. This is my Lamborghini keyboard. Everything Lamborghini.
But I think it's gained the kudos from the car association rather than the other way around. You know what I mean? Like, it's a very fun thing to say.
It's just fun to say.
It is fun to say. But... that's what I'm saying. So you go through these processes of like not recreating the exact thing, but like going through the process that the real things went through, just taking a different, like an alternate universe.
Gotcha. Which Need for Speed game has the most cars?
Most cars?
Yeah.
That's a great question. I don't know.
There are so many Need for Speed games.
Yeah, it's gone on for very, very many years, and there's a lot of games.
I think that's the next question, actually.
I don't know, actually. I mean, you definitely get up into the, close to 100 cars kind of area. Like, it's, it's not the 400 that's in a Gran Turismo
Not
or a
quite
Forza.
400. So in Need for Speed Unbound has the most cars with 143.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because they've been supporting that a lot post-release as well. So.
And what's interesting is when I was looking up this and I was trying to like check all of these just to make sure that I'm not giving completely wrong information, everywhere that I looked up about this, they all talked about featuring the Polestar 1. Like they all like talked about the Polestar. Is there a reason the Polestar is like in every single little article I read about this? Was there like a special thing?
Yeah, you kind of do these deals sometimes.
So it's like you should use the Polestar.
Yeah, so a lot of the smaller manufacturers, so a lot of the bigger manufacturers, like have a little bit of a standoffish approach to licensing. So they'll be like, they're big enough that they don't need the games to kind of promote anything. So they're trying to protect their brands. The smaller companies or the hungrier car companies are actually trying to be in every game because it's a form of marketing.
Right.
And so this is why you see sometimes some cars going in and getting prominence and those things, because the car companies really want to kind of be in with the big boys. So they tend to be the smaller manufacturers. They tend to be the more specialist cars that want to establish their name. It's a really good way, especially if you've got a car that isn't going to make a lot of instances, to still kind of people get to experience it in some way and get name of word of mouth, whatever. How many people are going to drive some of these more obscure cars? Well, you put them in a big video game and you promote them, and then people get to drive them and they get to know them, and then they can maybe, if they're rich enough down the line, buy them. So that's kind of
There's going to be some 8-year-old that always wanted a McLaren because they played it in Need for Speed.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're Ferrari or Lamborghini or whatever, you're like, well, we don't, it's cool, but it's not that big a deal. But if you're say one of these smaller companies, it can make a big difference to how well you're known.
Unbound also, I think it had the most because it's the one that came out after the Need for Speed movie. So they put in all of the cars from the movie.
Sure.
Specifically.
Yeah.
So, as we were talking about before, how many Need for Speed games are there in total? There's a bunch.
It little bit depends on how you count them. Because in terms of how platforms work, you might have a game that's the same name as something on another platform, but is actually a different game. This famously happened to the original Hop Suit 2, I think, where the game on Xbox was a different game than the game on PlayStation, even though they're named the same thing, because it was ported, but it wasn't like ported like for like. It was like
somebody definitely thought that
they've interpreted it rather than ported it. So, and like the DS games, for example, often have the same name, but a completely different game with a completely different engine and those things. So the answer is not as clear cut as you might
Well, the
expect.
answer that I have is 25.
I think you might have 25 different title names.
Do you know
I
which
think it's
one
probably more than that in terms of actual games that play differently.
Do you know which one the last one was?
Other than Unbound?
Unbound was the last one.
Yeah.
So the very first one was The Need for Speed in 94, and the last one was Need for Speed Unbound, which was 2022.
Yeah, and actually when
ago.
Criterion
When
Criterion originally got the Need for Speed gig, we bought a 3DO to go and play the original
I haven't
Need
heard
for
that
Speed
in a long time.
to kind of just kind of ground ourselves in not just where it's been, but where it originally originated from. So,
And wasn't there a remake of the original in like 2015 or something like that?
there was something called Need for Speed without any other subtitle, but it wasn't a remake of the original. Yeah. Once again, the naming in Need for Speed is confusing because you have Need for Speed 3 Hot Pursuit, and then you have Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2, and then you have Need for Speed Hot Pursuit.
Right. Okay.
So they've actually been going down in number, starting with 3, going to 2, and then the Criterion one was just Need for Speed Hot Pursuit.
Why?
Because it would be confusing to go upwards, I think, because if you did Need for Speed
But
Hot
going
Pursuit
down
3,
is great.
they're unique at least. They're individual. So, yeah.
Okay. And the Need for Speed franchise is the second most successful racing game franchise of all time. After what other property? And I'm talking in terms of sales.
I mean, Mario Kart beats everything.
Damn,
by,
I was hoping that
by
I would,
many margins.
that I wouldn't.
No, Mario Kart is
that you
very
wouldn't be able to get that one so
Yeah.
quickly. Because I was talking to our editor and I was kind of asking him some of these questions, and we were like, well, it's not Forza and it's not Gran Turismo, and like neither one of us was thinking of Mario Kart. But
Yeah,
you
no,
got that one pretty
yeah.
quick. But yeah, Mario Kart is like, it's like way up here, and then there's Need for Speed, which is a good bit past Mario Kart, but it's above all the other ones.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the sales of New Speed Underground and Underground 2 and then Most Wanted, I think all three of them did over 10 million each. So yeah, it is a monster brand, but it's had a long history, and like Mario Kart, there's been a lot of games, so you know it's been good, but Mario Kart is universal. You can't get away from Mario Kart.
Yeah. I've never really played a lot of Mario Kart. Only when I was working at Stack Overflow a million years ago, we had an offsite in San Diego, and we made a game room. And every time we would drink, which was every night that we were there, which was almost a week, we would all go into the game room and just have huge Mario Kart tournaments, which I was actually okay at it. It's the only time I've really ever played.
I think the lesson to take from Mario Kart is there is no substitute for making a game fun.
Yeah, it's wild.
You can have the most, accurate, technical, blah, 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 blah. But fun is really the ultimate metric. And when Burnout originally was coming out, we actually positioned it as the anti-Gran Turismo. Mm-hmm. It was like, Gran Turismo is great, but it is boring. And we've got a game that is not boring. And yes, if you put it by almost any metric, we are beat by Gran Turismo, apart from the one that matters, which is fun.
And with Mario Kart, you don't have to know how to play anything. You literally just pick up a...
It's also very cleverly structured in terms of how races are balanced.
Yeah. Well, Nintendo's like great at just like teaching you what you need to know as you need to know it.
But it also like the leader having enough headwind to like the way that they balance multiplayer, not just the single player, but multiplayer is really clever. And it's actually one of the tricks that a bunch of the racing games I've pulled work, where if you're playing multiplayer, your aerodynamics are better if you're behind. So you can slowly catch up, and so it keeps the whole thing balanced. It's not overpowered, but it's a very slight rubber band that just lets everything feel like it's tight, but not feel like you're you're overpowering somebody from being behind. And obviously, Mario Kart takes that even further. But it's these subtle things which you hope the players don't really notice. It should just feel like a subtle thing of making the races just feel good.
Right.
Never overpowering is to feel like you should blame the game for failing, but also never feel like I'm 10 seconds into this race and I've already lost.
Right.
Right? That's never a good feeling.
Okay, so burnout, when you're in a hot rod, is when you're going around in circles basically, and your tires are smoking, and you're doing it for friction on your tires, you're doing it for friction on the starting line, right? So that's what an actual burnout is. So the first official burnout was performed by Dan Garlitz at the NHRA, and that's the National Hot Rod Association's Hot Rod Magazine Championship drag races in Riverside, California in 1969. What was a burnout at that time that we know now of a burnout? What was it originally called in 1969? This is one you'll definitely know. It's not obscure at all.
Well, the way you've set up the question, I'm going to fail it horribly. So, I mean, is it a blowout? Because, I mean, usually what would happen is the tire would actually it would get to the point where the tire rips itself apart, which is what you call a blowout rather than a burnout. But it basically, the reason why it ended up being a burnout was because they got it down to a thing where you didn't just completely blow the tire, but also like the smoke, you could generate the appearance of flames. Maybe
looks
not
really fun.
Yeah. So were you saying, what was it originally called?
It originally wasn't called a burnout. So it was originally called a bleach box.
Never
because
heard
they
that
put
before.
bleach in the tires. So in order to make, I'm here to educate everyone.
Yeah.
So they put bleach in the tires so that it would really make the smoke when they were going around. And then they realized that you could put water in the tires and it does the same thing. You don't have to worry about actually putting bleach in the tires.
Yeah.
And then it came to be known as like a burnout after that. But there is some apparently argument that instead of California, it was actually Georgia in the mid 60s that this actually started, but the first actual official burnout.
This is the thing is that what it
69.
started off as was actually a failure. Like they're making a show of something that actually had been it happened all the time, where you'd be your rubber would be kind of melting off your tires, and then your tire would blow out. And so
those tires are really expensive.
Yeah. That's why every time when you see someone doing these kind of burnouts and like drifts and those things, like I have friends who are not professional drifters, but like amateur drifters, but go on a regular basis. And yeah, they get through tires. Like the tires are the main. The car isn't the main expense of being a drifter. The tires the main expense of being a drifter.
Where do they go to be drifters? Well, everywhere,
Tracks.
because they're drifters. There's like drift races.
Yeah. You go to a track day, and there's a tire. Basically, people selling tires, and you put tires on your car, and you do it. Yeah. Actually, somebody I know who worked with me, she actually is starting up like a women's drift organization to encourage more women into the sport.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like it would be fun, but like I was saying before, going that fast in a car is really frightening to me.
The more you're drifting, the slower you go. So
yeah, but don't you go really fast down the straight, or are you drifting the entire time?
You try and drift as much as you can. Yeah. So you're basically going from drift to drift to drift, and it's not about going fast at all. It's about the kind of.
Do your drifts get scored instead of like who crosses the thing first? Okay. I'm going to look this up because that sounds really amazing.
Yeah. It's more like a gymnastic sport than it is like a race.
That's rad. In the blockbuster 1994 film, what speed does Keanu Reeves need to maintain so that the bus that Sandy Bullock is driving doesn't explode?
It's either 50 or 60. I can't remember. Is it 50?
It's 50.
50. Yeah.
Like how I worked that in there.
Yeah.
Cool. So
fun movie though.
It is a fun movie. I watched it recently.
The best bit about that movie is that the pivotal scene, they're going across a freeway interchange, and there's like
where they have to jump it.
Yeah, and there's a piece of the freeway interchange out, and obviously in real life, if you came across the end of a piece of road, the bus, whatever speed it was going, would just fall off the edge.
Didn't Mythbusters do that?
I'm sure. But in the movie, you can see there's a little kicker plate to justify why it's like wheeling across the jump.
Like, how'd that get there?
Yeah, I don't know, but it is one of the more obvious examples of, you know, a stunt jump kind of, you know, being added to something, which is why I think a lot of these, like a lot of fun car games run kind of movie physics rather than...
Well, of course, you're not going to want like real physics.
Exactly.
Did Need for Speed ever put the bus in? Because that would have been a great...
not Need for Speed, Burnout, we had a bus and crash mode, obviously. So we had buses and things, yeah.
So I think that would be really fun. Just pretend there's a bomb on the bus. You can't go under 50.
Well, we didn't do the bomb on the bus thing, but we did do the smash it into the intersection and lots of, you know, other cars crash and everything roll. You know, the crash mode was very much in that vein. But the crash mode was basically semi-inspired by the sequence in Final Destination 2. Oh. Where you have a semi-truck with a bunch of like logs
this came out when I was in high school, and I couldn't, back when I was in South Carolina, so I drove everywhere. I had a car. I would not get behind trucks with any sort of trees, and it happened a lot, like logging trees all over the place.
Very common,
in South Carolina. So I would be so afraid if I couldn't get out, because I was like, nope, I've seen this movie. That is not happening to me. My luck, this is happening to me.
Well, yeah, so that sequence, there's a sequence in Bad Boys 2 where you've got like a car transporter and the baddies like releasing cars off the back of the car transporter as the heroes in their Ferrari, I think it is like weaving in and out of traffic to catch up to the baddies and those things. So like there are certain sequences from movies that we just saw over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, and looked at all the details and looked at all the particles coming off and how, you know, everything felt and how it looked. And what was funny was, I don't know this for a fact, but I've heard it said that when Christopher Nolan was doing Batman Begins and they had the brand new Batmobile, the kind of tanky Batmobile, he added the sequence of the Batmobile like jumping over roofs, because he's been playing a bunch of Burnout where we've been like doing that, and he thought that was a really cool thing to add into the other bizarre thing is we had there's a Wyclef Jean single called Fast Car, where they filmed the entire video for the song in our engine. So they like, if you watch it, I mean, you can actually, you know, it's actually filmed in the Burnout Paradise engine is the music video for Wyclef Jean's Fast Car.
Somebody must have been a big Burnout fan.
Well, I think Sony, he was signed to Sony, and Sony gave us a thing. But it also kind of worked. So yeah. Cool.
Okay, last question. What country in Europe, other than Germany's Autobahn that we actually already talked about, has the highest speed limit?
Other than Germany?
Other than Germany.
Well, if you're driving a nice enough car, you can pretty much go whatever speed you want to in Italy.
Because no one's gonna.
Well, in Italy, actually, that's not fair. In Italy, the police will stop you, but not to give you a ticket, but just so that they can admire your car. That's
they don't ask for like cash.
No. They're like, oh my god, you know, a Ferrari or something. So I don't know actually.
It's not Italy, but that's a good guess.
Well, it's Italy only in certain circumstances.
But I mean, if you go really fast, then they're not really going to be able to catch you, right? So
that's America. Yeah. It's the bootlegger. Dukes of Hazzard kind of, if you want to transport your illegal alcohol, the terrible thing that is alcohol and therefore should be prohibited. You need to
I'm from South Carolina originally, so it's like the land of the stock cars.
You just need to outdrive the cops and you're fine.
Smokey and the Bandit.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, Smokey and the Bandit, it hasn't aged well. But
it is not.
But it is.
But the chases were great.
It's an entertaining movie.
The chases are really good.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's Poland. It's the Autostrada.
Yeah, that does make some sense. Yeah, I've not been to Poland, so
neither have I.
But it's an amazing country.
Congratulations, Hamish! You have won the game.
Well, I feel like some of the questions I didn't have answers to. So
still won though, because we got a really good conversation out of it.
But hopefully the score will go on the scoreboard.
Yeah, we have a huge, if you're listening, we have a huge scoreboard right beside us.
And, I may be the first name on that, but like, obviously,
I should start doing that. Just have but not all the games are going to be a quantifiable type of thing. I'll figure out some way to quantify it.
Well, I don't even think they need to have the same metric. I just think,
winning the stupid little game Olympics.
Exactly, but each game may have its own stupid little scoring.
Oh.
So that's 4 out of 5 chickens versus,
That's something that I will have to work on for the website, because I am going to be working on the website.
And then people have to decide which is the better score.
People can do their own tier list of the games.
Exactly.
This is perfect.
So, so I'm winning, kind of.
Well, yeah, you are number one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's the best way. It's the best way to win.
It is the best way to win.
It's like the end of War Games.
Oh yeah. Where can we find you, Hamish?
In a borough underground. I don't really do social media. I have to say, I'm not a big social media guy. So
honestly, especially right now, you're more sane than I am.
Yeah, my partner is very online, and so I kind of choose not to be, which is great. So I lurk. I'm that kind of, long-time listener, no-time caller kind of scenario.
Well, is there anything that you'd like to promote?
Not yet. But I'm working on a prototype right now. We'll see. These things take forever to make, so don't hold your breath.
But I have seen part of it. I saw a bit of it today.
Yeah,
I can say that it's very cool.
Yeah, I think you just as I said, you if you can make things, you try and make things.
Yep.
And you see what happens. And I think
that's what I'm doing with this podcast. I'm
absolutely.
I need to make something.
Yeah, just make something, and it's valuable. You'll find its value over time.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But yeah, no, I'm largely uncontactable.
I'm so jealous. Because I unfortunately am very online, and I'm still on Twitter, even though it is even more of a hell site than it has ever been.
Yeah, I deleted my Twitter account, which
I stopped for a while, but it's a month until the election, and
well, that's even more reason. But it just means that when people go, "Oh, see my thing on Twitter," and I'm like, I can't, so guess I'm not going to. But yeah, no, I definitely think that it is one of the real advantages of being a hermit is you just kind of get on with stuff.
Yeah.
And politics, I find the sportification of politics,
the horse racing, it's all a horse race.
Well, yeah, and in particular the commentary, it's ESPN, is actually deeply it's unhelpful, but it's also a bad paradigm. If you care about actually what this all means, it's more about good governance and policy and all the boring stuff that no one they try and hype it up and make it kind of exciting and all those things. You're but this is meant to be how you run things.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that I kind of turns me off.
It's so much more stupid than I could ever have imagined.
I just think if you buy into the idea that it's some kind of sports team game, I think you're missing the entire point of what politics is really meant to be about. And I think that's the thing that I just see, even whatever part of the political spectrum you're on, see repeated all over and over again, to the point where people don't even see it anymore. CNN exists partly because, it's the big breaking news and everything is, we've got to comment on this thing. And you're do you?
Like I said, I am online, so you can follow me as well at Cake Tease. That's CAKE_TEASE on Instagram and Twitter. And no, it's not a sexual thing. I used to be a cake decorator. So that's what Cake Tease comes from. So yeah, I used to be a cake decorator. So thank you so much for joining us, Hamish, on the very first episode. Did you have fun?
Yeah, I had fun. And this is going to be, you're going to make a thing of this. It's going to be great.
Aw, thanks. I hope to. It was fun.
Yeah, and I'm sure as this thing develops, you know, and you get better and better at it. And more people are above me in the scoreboard. At some point, I guess I'll have to come back.
Yeah, you'll come back so that you can put yourself on, figure out some way to put you on top again.
Yeah, exactly.
Number
1, baby.
Yeah, number 1 in many ways. First, we should just go first. Yeah. So thank you so much for listening to Stupid Little Games, especially for the very first time. You can subscribe on Apple and Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. If you leave a review, it actually really helps a lot, especially for a new podcast. So I'd love to have 5 stars. If not, that's okay too. But it really goes a long way, especially for new things. So this podcast is executive produced and hosted by me. I'm Jess Pardue. The logo art and the theme music are by the amazing Bayard Russell. Audio engineering and editing is by Gabe Koski, a man who somehow looks like both of the Wet Bandits. See you next Tuesday. Goodbye.